The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View. The show is sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee, and if you like to attend our meetings, they're the second Thursday of every month at 6:30 at the Crown Plaza. And if you want to find out more about our organization, you can go to nashuagop.org to see our website and learn about the events that we have.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello and welcome to The People's View. This session is going to be a little bit different as we have three candidates, Republican candidates, for the House of Representatives from Ward 9?
Ward 9.
Ward 9. So, Bill, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go around and the people will be able to meet the two new candidates that we have for our ward.
Well, thank you, and it's certainly a pleasure to be serving with our two fine candidates, Jeon and Paula. So I'm the current incumbent in Nashua Ward 9, and I'm running to keep our taxes down. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee. We bring the money into the state, and we're very thrifty about the money that comes in so that we don't get too crazy with surpluses.
You've been on the committee for a while.
Yes, my third term.
Support the speaker in the committee. Go ahead.
Right. Anyway, the goal of the Ways and Means Committee is to decide on tax law. Do we want to add tax or do you want to cut taxes? And we always have these great ideas on how to add a capital gains tax or increase a local tax option for Hampton Beach so that they can charge more to the seasonal residents. And we always say, no, thank you. We think the taxes are fine the way they are. And we depend on our business opportunities in New Hampshire, like the liquor business, like the lottery, to bring in the extra money that we need.
And who's next? You're next.
My name's Jeon, and I am a member of the Nashua Republican City Committee. And personally, as an immigrant from Korea, I feel I'm living the American dream. And having benefited from what America has offered me, I view running as a candidate for Ward 9 State Representative as a way to serve and give back.
Oh,
I've spent well over 30 years in management positions in high-tech and financial services. Educationally speaking, I've got science and engineering degrees from MIT, UC Berkeley, and an MBA from Suffolk University. So I think I've got some qualifications that will be important in terms of helping make decisions. And we were just chatting earlier, U.S. News and World Report just ranked New Hampshire as the fifth best state in the country. And I want to do my part to make sure we stay up there and improve our rankings.
good, good.
I believe in limited government, and it's got to be very careful about how it serves the public good. And I believe in free markets and limited taxation, and I would oppose any effort to impose a broad-based state sales tax or income tax.
Very good. We need more people like you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Carl, thank you for having us. My name is Paula Moran, and I'm also a candidate on the Republican ticket. I have 34 years experience at a local employer, a local high-tech company. I have a master's degree, an MBA, and I also have a master's degree in theology. And I would like to ditto what Iang said. I've had a very wonderful life here in New Hampshire. It's time to give back. And I believe I have the skills and the interests to do that. I'm a lifelong Nashua resident. So, and I'm very pleased to be here.
We
this
need
is
people
very
like
exciting.
both of you to be part of the delegation up there. We need to get out our Republican votes, as all of you know, and we can talk about some of the issues, but I think all of us are going around knocking on doors, meeting the people.
Right.
So you give us a little feedback on what you're hearing out there. Again, maybe we can start off with you, Paula.
Actually, the biggest theme I've heard from people is they're very disgruntled with politics in general.
Right.
of course, they're talking about the national level, and I just keep reminding them that I say, New Hampshire is not Washington, D.C.
Definitely not.
You know, don't lose the faith. You know, we're a good group of people here in New Hampshire. We collaborate. We talk to each other. We don't.
We listen to our.
We listen to each other, and don't be dismayed by what's happening at the national level, and just keep in mind, you know, what the message John McCain left us all with is he believes in this country and our ability to dialogue and get through issues, and so I try to leave them on a positive note.
Very good. Jeon?
Well, I think people are still very concerned about the economy. I think the good news is the economy seems to be roaring ahead.
Right.
But we all just got our property tax valuations, and I was just astounded that they could be increased that much in the span of 1 year. So I think people are very, very concerned about where taxes are going and how they're going to be able to afford to stay in their houses.
Well, that's something I think we all have to wait until they figure it out, because they still haven't really divided it up between industry and residential, and hopefully we just keep spending down and do only what needs to be done and do it right.
I think that's key, because when times are good, the temptation is to spend more. I think you need to be frugal, and I think you need to be wise in storing up reserves when things are going well. Not just,
which is what we did in the last 2 years. Now we have over $100 million for a rainy day fund, and Bill can tell us how he wants to keep it up there.
Yeah. Well, there was actually more money that could have gone into the rainy day fund.
Right.
But it was not done because there was a concern if we had too much in the rainy day fund that the next administration may not be as thrifty as the current administration and find a way to spend that instead of using it for more responsible purposes. And in fact, on that theme, one of the concerns I get when I hear about when I knock on doors is the public pension system.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because we're $5 billion in the hole, $5 with $1 billion in the hole, and we're slowly trying to deal with that over the next 20 years. But it's like a mortgage that we're giving next to nothing in principal and just kind of kicking the can down the road and hoping inflation will bail us out on this pension problem. So I have a bill to deal with that. Didn't quite make it this year, but I file it again this coming year to look at a different funding mechanism for pensions. And that is we would put a fixed dollar amount, not a percent of pay.
Good. I think that's necessary. That's what all the companies have done.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's a lot different on the public area than it is the private area than it is in the public area. And they keep saying, well, where do we change? Well, someplace you're going to have to stop and say you either have two systems or you have a completely different system, but you got to do that in the near future.
And that's right. Many states have made that transition, Nebraska in particular. They've gone to a hybrid system, said, look, people in the system now, okay, new hires, we just can't keep doing this. We've got to do something a little different and do it more like a private plan, which has advantages because if you've got some control over how to invest your money, you might do a little bit better than just buying treasury bonds.
I agree with you. I'm happy to do that. I did that way back in the 90s when I worked for DuPont. They changed it there, and I'm very happy they did.
Yeah. Let me follow up on Jan's good point about the tax situation. When I was knocking on doors, people would come back to me, as you folks have heard, about the increase in the assessed valuations of the city of Nashua. And they're up in arms about that. We don't know the full impact because the tax rates have to be adjusted, but we know there's going to be an increase in taxes. We know that. And we are sure of that because we've already seen the mayor of Nashua blow through the tax cap that we had in the city. He just ignored the tax cap, went to court. Alderman Moriarty was one of the gentlemen trying to force this issue to rein in the spending. That got tossed out due to standing. So now we have an opportunity in this coming election, Carl. We have an opportunity in this coming election with the constitutional amendment to give standing to the taxpayers to challenge the taxes that are coming down.
And I think the people generally don't see that. It's at the end of the ballot.
Yeah.
It's a paragraph, and you read it through, but the people do not have standing the Constitution of the state is read by the Supreme Court. So we have to put this amendment in, and everybody should be voting it. The legislature voted overwhelmingly, well over 2/3 of the vote, to be able to have this on the ballot. And I think that it'll do both sides of the political field agree with that.
And I hope people really pay attention to that, because when you talk about the difference between public and private pensions, I mean, there aren't any private pensions anymore, but basically people are relying on Social Security. I mean, this year, Social Security's increase, the cost of living increase was 2%. And I mean, at the local level, the national budget, I think, went up by 3.5%. So it's outpacing the ability of people on fixed incomes to be able to afford to live in town or New Hampshire.
But we have to be able to get that constitutional amendment passed, because even you can't leave it blank, because that counts as a vote, and when you determine what 2/3 are.
And that'll be on the ballot in November.
That'll be on the ballot. And hopefully, if you have any questions, ask the people at the ballot box. They'll tell you what to do on that if you have any difficulty in understanding the language. I don't think so. It's pretty straightforward. But vote for it, in our view anyway. Bill, you brought up the pension. Can you tell us more about what you're going to offer?
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities for pension reform. But basically it's going to be some pain for the long-term gain. The solution that we were kicking around last week in the pension committee that I serve on was to look at a surplus allocation to the pension deficit. We talked about the rainy day fund. If you put in the rainy day fund, it can be drawn out of the rainy day fund. If you put into the pension deficit, which is $5 billion, that never comes out until it's paid off and we can do more benefits. So it's a one-way use of the money that can't be misspent by less responsible
That's
administration.
a good one. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I have to give our Senator Kevin Avard and Senator Carson, credit for that. We were kicking around ideas in the meeting, and that's kind of what we decided on, and that's what we are going to recommend in our interim study report.
So how do we get the word out to the voters and to the general public that this is a good thing?
Vote for Republicans. Paula,
Sounds good.
Myself. Because believe us, we
do
intend
need to
watch.
get more in Nashua, more Republicans. And one time we did. We had in 2010, we had 22 out of the 28 representatives were Republican. And we can do it again.
Yeah.
We had a good time in
message.
that 2 years there.
We had great candidates like we do now.
There you go. Right. We had a lot of new candidates. Paula, do you have any idea what your people are really hot on? The ones you talked to?
Well, as I said, the biggest issue was that they were disgruntled with politics in general. But certainly taxes are a great big issue. And I really, as Republicans, we really need to get the message out there that we need to preserve the New Hampshire way. And the New Hampshire way is all about, keeping taxes low for middle-class families, keeping business taxes low. When you draw people into the state and they can work at decent jobs, buy a decent home, the ripple effect of that is phenomenal. And I think another thing that we do particularly well in New Hampshire, and even at the local level, is that we have lots of job training opportunities for people who don't necessarily want to do the traditional 4-year college path, but learning a trade. For instance, my employer is very big in advocating a program that's going on at the VOTEC here in Nashua, the community college here in Nashua. It's called we refer to it as the Microelectronics Boot Camp program. So it's basically about a 10-week program where people are given on-the-job skills training to learn how to work on microwave module devices. And this is a really great program because when you complete the program, you're lined up with interviews for local employers, and there's several companies that need these job skills. And it's just a wonderful opportunity, even for somebody coming right out of high school, to get into a really solid company and to learn a real valuable skill set. And then once you're in the company, if you're motivated and so inclined, you take advantage of their tuition reimbursement programs. You turn this into an associate's.
Right.
Then you turn it into a bachelor's. And who knows, it's up to you at
And
that
right here in
point.
Nashua,
And
our
it's right
community
here in
college is
Nashua.
really working well on that because they have ties with Granite State, so you go right to a
Yes.
4-year degree
Yes.
or even higher.
Yes.
And I think
Exactly.
there's a number of companies that could use that.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you got the magazine I got about a week ago that listed all these companies. I didn't realize we had that many manufacturing companies. We do, and it's coming back because the large majority of them are looking to expand.
Right.
Because this said little bits and pieces of stories in there about Hitchner out in Milford.
Yes.
That's growing. Another one that was in up near Manchester. I can't remember the name, but they're all growing. They're all planning on expanding.
That's
and
right.
I think one of the things that we're going to have a problem with maybe is transportation, just getting around to some of these people, because you are going to have all these people coming from all over, and that's part of the problem why the valuation ran up, because everybody wants a house in New Hampshire now,
Right.
because it's a good place to live in. John, did you have anything
Well,
to add to that?
I really like what Paula said about the New Hampshire way. I was
Yeah.
doing a little bit of research, and I didn't realize this, but the New Hampshire Constitution predates the U.S. Constitution by 5 years.
Right.
And actually, it starts off with the Bill of Rights. So this tradition of personal liberty and freedom, I think, is
Right.
very, very strong in New Hampshire, and I think we need to make sure we maintain that.
Yeah. Our forefathers were pretty smart in their way. Sometimes people knock because it's how many years ago? 250 years ago. No, we can do it, and we can apply it the way it should be applied. You believe what the words are.
Absolutely. I mean, it's articulated very clearly and very concisely, and that's a lot harder than what they churn out these days.
That's right.
With
That's
thousands of pages that nobody ever reads.
Well, what about some of the things that some of the people are hurting on, like the addiction? What should we be doing? I know we fell behind because I think of what I consider an unorganized administration several years back. And now we have the money, we're putting it into good effect, and I think we're doing programs that we can evaluate the value of. Do you have anything favorable that you'd like to say or questionable about what's going on and how we're handling these funds and our response to the problem?
Well, in response to the problem in general, I would just very much, and I know I echo the community at large when I say this, hats off to our firefighters and our other first responders. It's incredible the work that they do, and just, the fact that somebody in trouble can walk into their local fire station and within hours, be on a list for some place that can actually help them. I think that it's just incredible to me how much we expect of our local first responders, and they've really risen to the challenge, and hats off to them. And there needs to be a certain minimal safety net to help people out there.
And I think we help one another a lot too.
That is also part of the New Hampshire way,
Right.
because we don't believe in wealth redistribution, right?
Right.
So you keep your taxes low, you keep the laws simple, you preserve people's personal liberties, and then people come forward on their own. An incredible amount of volunteerism in New Hampshire in terms of time, especially.
Yeah, our town in Nashua has a tremendous number of different organizations that do
right.
things. And the one thing that I've seen over the years that I've been involved is the fact that they're trying to integrate, or I shouldn't say integrate, but work together in a way that you get 3 or 4 organizations that are attacking a problem
Yes.
from different sides. And together, they have a much better chance of succeeding than they do individually.
Right.
But Carl, you raised a very good point. I mean, like the people that are running things, it's a different set of people. And
Yeah.
the people that are in charge of the government, you want to have people that are competent and are making fact-based decisions, and that they're putting the right metrics in place. Because otherwise, I mean, it's an awesome responsibility because you're taking all this tax money in, and it needs to be spent in a judicious and correct manner. And again, if you're not measuring the right things, and if you don't have the right programs in place, you're basically just wasting people's money. And in fact, I mean, last year when I was running for alderman in Ward 9, there was a very good case in point where there was all this wonderful noise about having this performing arts theater in Nashua. And I remember doing the financial analysis. It's not that hard to do the financial analysis. And they were doing all these comparisons. It turns out that one of the closest comparisons was the Palace Theater in Manchester, which happens to be a nonprofit. All their information, the IRS Form 990, is available online. As far as I could tell, because I raised the issue, nobody had looked at what their financials were.
Yeah,
So, and I think that's the benefit of having people that have
a background.
a background in management and finance. So you need to have people that are going to take a look at the facts on the ground and run the numbers and determine whether if this makes sense or not.
Well, I think you're right, and I'm just wondering why they haven't gotten their $4 million that they have to start with before they can go talking about.
Well, here's the problem. Even with the $4 million, I mean, the good news is the interest rates are going up.
Right.
But if you have a $4 million endowment at, let's say, a 4% safe withdrawal rate, that's only $160,000 a year.
Yeah, that's not
The Manchester Performing Arts Theater runs about $1 million deficit. Okay, so how are you going to make up the $850,000? Well, that's got to come from someplace.
Wait a minute, we're saving the rainy day fund for the pensions now. Come on.
Right, I want to follow up about some of the themes that you guys have talked about, which are excellent ideas. The community college system is a superb way to train people with the skill set that they need for jobs today. You know, Jan and I went to MIT. We got MBAs. You know, we've kind of taken one different tack to this. But my brother is a tool and die person. He's a machinist. He runs CNC machines. And there's a big demand here in Nashua for people with CNC skills. There's rapid machine in our city, expanding rapidly, fast turnaround. I have a friend who works there. He's 76 years old. He wants to work part-time. 6 days a week he's working because they can't. please, you know, if we could have some people who are good with their hands and don't want to spend $40,000, $50,000 a year for a college education, but can get a great skill set. There's terrific jobs here in Nashua today for those kind of people. So I think that's just an excellent point you made, Paula, with the community colleges. I also want to follow up on one thing with the workforce relative to the addiction issue.
Yeah.
I sponsored a bill to deal with, support the governor's initiatives to make New Hampshire recovery friendly. And part of that is once you've gotten past your habit and now you're going back to society, can you get a job? Can you get a job? And the problem with that is we have a number of professions that are highly regulated, highly licensed, that would be an impediment to somebody who's trying to get back. So I sponsored a bill to deal with that, which was to, if you want to join a licensed profession, you'd be able to ask ahead of time whether you'd be qualified for that profession and then have a pathway to get into it. Now, if you're an opioid user, you're not going to be a pharmacist, so don't think about going that direction. But there are many other occupations that can be available to you if you are willing to approach the agencies to get clearance. So I'm trying to make it passed the House. It didn't pass the Senate. But I want to submit that bill again this coming year to get because we got this problem with a lot of people who are able-bodied but are trying to kick the habit, and a tremendous demand for workers. And how do we solve that? Maybe this is a way to get both ends of that working.
And it's not only the opioid problem, but it's the people who have some mental health problems too.
Yeah.
And we're finally paying attention to, and I'd like to see that going. They had the only place that some mental health people had problems with was the state prison, and now they're trying to find a place where they could do that in more hospitable place.
Yeah, recovery friendly instead of
Right.
Just the punishment for your misbehavior.
Yeah.
Because
think-
a lot of those people have certain type of problems that put them in situations that they don't react to well, but then they've learned that.
That's right. That's right. I was going to say, I think that we as a society are arriving at the realization that mental health is every bit as important as physical health. And I think that as long as we continue to make strides in that direction, that's a positive thing.
I think that's what we're finally looking at, where the problem areas are and what we have to do to solve it.
That's
Whether
right.
it's recidivism as well as some of the problems like mental health or drugs, all those things are being looked at in an analytical way.
Right.
And I think I've noticed that in the last year, Bill, and maybe you could comment on this. We're paying attention to more detail on some of those bills.
Yeah.
And what could be a bad reaction, or what's a good reaction, or what's the timing that's necessary. You can't take too long, but you can't just jump into it either and throw money at it.
Right.
That's what we've done in the past, and we wasted a heck of a lot of money.
That's the metrics you've talked about, John.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think the overall mood of the country, I think, is much better than it was, let's say, 2 years ago. And I think there's more hope. And given that on a national level and here in New Hampshire, unemployment is at all-time lows,
Right.
I think that's going to cause a general improvement in people's everyday lives. But I think that means it's going to be important to have people in government that understand the importance of fiscal discipline.
Yes.
Because when things start to go well and the rising tide lifts all boats, then there's going to be a temptation to just spend money like it's water.
That's true. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I don't know if you've recognized with the new president of the University of New Hampshire, he comes from North Carolina, and North Carolina has gone through quite a number of things, and I'm not talking about the hurricane either, where they've raised the income of their people and the businesses that went there. I know I was involved in startup business in Texas, and we had people come from North Carolina and tell how they got started. And they have one center, but they promised the people throughout the state that everybody would benefit. And I think we have to realize that in this state too, that each area can benefit when we start growing a reputation of startup businesses that succeed. And so we should look at that and see how we can focus on getting people to come up here, or current people that are here, to expand their businesses, broaden their product line, somehow do that at a very profitable way. And it's a good place to live too, besides that.
Yeah. I think that's a very important point, having a public-private partnerships,
Right.
especially with higher education and research driving innovation and new businesses.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how this president of the university helps develop their supposed new business areas that they have, research and stuff.
Well, there's an area I could comment a bit on that topic, which is the regenerative tissue
Yes.
business
Manchester.
in Manchester. We've got this brilliant guy, Dean Kamen,
Right.
who's won this contract for roughly $250 million of investment. And where's that going to be? Well, he said it's going to be in Manchester, New Hampshire. This is for doing tissue regeneration. It's funded by the DoD for their veterans who are all beat up and like to be able to help them recover a little quicker by using their own DNA to make their own tissue. And Dean Kamen says that this technology is established in terms of the biology. It needs to be scaled up in terms of manufacturing, which is what he does. So we've thrown a incentive to the regenerative tissue business to relocate in New Hampshire to do this work that's coming out of MIT, our alma mater, all this biotech stuff, on being able to take your own cells and make those cells into a different form of tissue. And the most promising one right now is kidneys. There's a tremendous cost, medical cost, with end-stage renal disease.
Right.
That's not a fun situation, and there's a wait for kidneys. It's very tough. But if you can create another kidney out of your own tissue, transplant that, it won't be rejected because it's your own body. It solves this dialysis problem. It's a huge opportunity for the well-being of the people involved. It's a huge benefit to the cost of medical care in New Hampshire and other places. And it's a great business opportunity for the bright people from the UNH, because UNH they've committed to do graduate work in this manufacturing process of tissue regeneration. The science is coming out of MIT, but the manufacturing is coming out of New Hampshire. And UNH is partnered up for that. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Manchester. That brings up the transportation issues, which we talked about earlier. How do we get people from Cambridge to Manchester? Well,
or even from Nashua to Dover, wherever it's being worked.
right, yeah, the greater Manchester area. So we have some infrastructure opportunities for connecting the manufacturing process, which is strong in New Hampshire, with some of the world-class science that's, in our neighbor to the south. And
I think you're raising a very good point that I think there's a general theme that perhaps New Hampshire has an affinity for manufacturing and production. Because let's face it, I mean, it's hard to compete with Boston with all their research centers. But I think if we focus on what we're strong in and we can be competitive, I mean, it's basic economics. So if we concentrate on where our strengths are and we can partner with the folks that are doing the basic research and development and then taking it to the next level, I think that's a huge opportunity. And as I said, having a public-private partnership can go a long way to making sure that we're competitive and stronger in
and we're starting to look into that now at the Department of Transportation. They have a small committee that's looking to, they call P3 programs. And they're starting out small, like building rest stop areas or something like that, but they should be able to get into something that helps the manufacturing. So
we just talk a bit about commuter rail.
Yeah.
When I knock on doors, we all knock on doors. People ask me, well, what's going to happen with the commuter rail? And I said, well, 10 years ago we had a great shot with Massachusetts because they were expanding to Rhode Island, going to Worcester. They could extend the Lowell line into Nashua, Manchester Airport. But then the NBA had some problems with a snowstorm and it revealed a lot of the overall underlying management issues. And I think that opportunity...
Plus, we got too big for our britches, too.
Yeah, we were a little ambitious.
We went all the way to Montreal, I think. That's what some people were seeing, glory. But what they didn't do is look at it from a practical standpoint. You're not going to build that. That's so many millions of dollars in just a structure. I'm on the rail committee for Nashua, and they're looking a little bit broader, and I think it's going to be a combination of buses and trains and even maybe Uber cars in commuting, going to these industrial parks from where people live to the industrial park.
A private market solution?
Yeah, how about that? They're actually looking at that, and we have a private rail thing that's might, as a start up with ability to go from the airport all the way into Lowell. That's a company that's already got the go-ahead to do something from Worcester. Now that they got the Red Sox farm team.
You can see the Paw Sox
Yeah,
in Worcester.
the Paw Sox, yeah. But from Manchester, from Worcester over to Providence, and that airport. So they'll be connecting the different things, and they're talking about building a rail connection from the line that goes up past Portland over to at least Exeter, and they're doing something for industry too. I don't know if people know how much they put in one of these P3 programs where industry put in, and now they're getting propane gas and two other things. Some kind of specialized sand that they found over in Ossipee that they're selling, and they refurbished a stretch of track just for industrial purposes so that they can handle 100-ton trains. So that's something that's actually being looked at, but it's not got big attention, and maybe that's the way it'll grow. Because you just start with some little things and then show your success.
I think that's very important because I think you mentioned you started off too big. I mean, connecting Montreal.
That's right.
And maybe it's better to have a smaller focus. Why not focus on New Hampshire? Because as you say, so this all goes hand in hand. If we're going to strategically focus on manufacturing, and there's areas of development within New Hampshire. I mean, if you just take a ride up Route 3 at rush hour to Manchester, I mean, that's crazy, right? So I think there's lots of opportunities on a local scale where you don't have to wrangle with another state and all those gotchas.
And the east-west in New Hampshire needs help.
Yeah,
Definitely.
101.
So that's what we ought to be looking at.
And then maybe Manchester Airport as a hub, and figure out how to connect everything within New Hampshire.
Definitely.
Let's start there.
So anyway, we'll see what that
It's called
goes
agile development. That's borrowing from the software development world. I don't know how well it applies to the government world, but
Well, I think people are looking at government differently now. I think that despite what's happening federally, it'll be a little bit more organized by certain states, and I hope New Hampshire decides to be one of those states that does that. And we can, people here, I think, are a little bit more cooperative if you approach them fairly well. I don't know whether you have any feelings on that part of the subject. How do you think our political parties are going to be getting together? Well, I think we need, everybody seems to agree, we need more Republicans in there to have an attitude, a can-do attitude.
Yes.
Not a can-spend attitude, but a can-do
Can-do.
attitude. And I'm looking forward to that, for one more go-around in the legislature. But we got to get some more people, younger people, like you guys. Anyway, how do we go about getting more people to run for office locally?
Yeah. Well, let me just ask Paula, what made you think about running, Paul? You're a good candidate, and you kind of came out of the woodwork. So what kind of motivated you?
Really, in my mind, it's all about public service. And I'm at a good stage in my life where, you know, I've been very fortunate. I've always been employed gainfully, and I'm at a point in my life where, you know, I can reduce my hours or even step aside and you know, concentrate on larger issues for the whole state. So I think that, well, certainly with a $200 salary, you're not gonna, nobody's
It's true
here to
public
make
service, yeah.
Yes, no, it's
And a free toll transponder.
Exactly,
Plus
exactly.
mileage, yeah.
Right.
But
It is what it is. So
Yeah.
you know, obviously,
Yeah.
you have
We're
to.
volunteers.
There's.
you have to
you're-
like what you're doing, too.
Exactly. You have to like it. You have to
Yeah.
believe in it, and you have to be willing to juggle your time accordingly. So in terms of getting much younger people, I don't know about that, but
Well, relative to Carl and myself.
or the next generation, huh?
But I think some of our experiences are very interesting to other people who haven't really gone through what we've gone through in our lives, and don't realize how they can be applied to public need. Looking at it just a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And not jumping at a problem, but analyzing the problem a little bit better before you get started. And then have a progressive step. And you have to make sure, and any place, you know, you could reevaluate or shut it down or expand it.
Exactly.
You know, just watch how it grows, but make sure you're controlling everything.
Yeah.
That's right.
And, you know, Jan's analytical abilities is what we need in finance.
That's
to
it.
really look at the numbers of these proposals for huge spending. Is it worth it? How do we measure it? I mean, these are the kind of candidates that we really need to.
Well, your committee especially gets interested in that. Of course, I think science and technology has to do it too, because we have this problem with expensive electricity and stuff like that. Really has to. How do we solve that problem? We have any ideas?
I think you got to look at the realities of what you need and weigh that against the objectives of what the problem is you're trying to solve. And the problem we're trying to solve is lower electricity costs. We're not trying to solve climate change. We're trying to solve lower electricity costs in New Hampshire. Now, some of the other states, I went to a couple of conferences with folks from Massachusetts who are big on windmills and huge government subsidies for humongous windmills. It's not cost effective, but they're arguing, well, you know, it's the climate.
What about solar, or what about water power?
Well, hydro makes a lot of sense, but under the way the environmental regulations are written, water power, hydropower doesn't count toward these renewable energy source.
But it's completely green. Why wouldn't it count?
And it's completely renewable. It falls out of the sky.
Right.
You catch it. You run it through a turbine. You know, how green can you be?
So what regulation is that? We got to get rid of that one.
It's bizarre. I mean, the science technology,
Is that a state regulation or at the federal level?
it's a regional thing. There's this regional
Well, that's when they.
initiative, and
Yeah.
we had got into that with the previous administration, and now we're trying to extract ourselves from this about this commitment to renewable energy, which is good, but cheap renewable energy is better, like water out of the sky.
And we have a lot of dams around. I mean, our
Yeah.
electric company just sold 5 of them or something, didn't they?
Yeah, they had to divest, so they had to sell their portfolio.
Well, that sounds like a no-brainer. I mean,
You'd
why is
think
that
so.
so difficult to deal with?
Well, there's one. We've done pretty
Naive
good
question.
work in New Hampshire.
You're looking
Like,
to match to federal standards. That's what
yeah,
problem.
there's a lot of federal stuff that's just tying our hands. And
Well, I think the
that's-
good news is there are a lot of things that are changing at the federal level.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think it's
that's
a new
true.
opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
maybe we should get in front
Partner
of the
up.
line.
Yeah, right. So we got some ideas.
Absolutely.
Can you work with us?
We get a lot of snow that melts during the year.
Yeah. We do generate a lot of hot air in Concord, but that's a different.
That
A little
goes
windy
to-
there.
That's where we put a big windmill.
Put a big windmill in front of the legislature.
So,
Right. I
but-
just saw there was a segment on. I'm a fan of Norwegian news. That's a story for another day. But they were rebuilding one of their water plants, and they're getting 20% more electricity out of the exact same location because the
re-engineering.
turbines
Yeah.
and the technology had improved so much more.
And we
I
see
mean,
this
that's
with
a huge improvement.
we see this with aircraft. It's,
get him on science and technology.
yeah.
But no, I agree. It's a lot of new things that people haven't tried because of the advance in different types of equipment.
Well, I think we need to be more forward-thinking and innovative in our approach to solving these problems.
Yeah.
And it's just it's really annoying to me. I've dealt with this in my career where you hear, well, we can't do that because we've never done it that way
That's
before, right?
Well, I that's the kind of excuse that a lot of people in our bureaucracy, they're not willing to change. We still have people that don't use the digital system for communicating on applications and stuff like that. And other ones, really, some of the agencies in the state just to do it by paper still. mailing it back and forth, not only the time, but the, errors that occur.
Well, we're making some progress on that with Charlie Arlinghouse.
Charlie
Yeah.
Arlinghouse and Frank Edelblut, those are the two ones that they're focusing on this year. But every agency has to really undergo another analysis, I think. DOT has some young management people, so they're pretty much where they should be, but even they could improve, because there are systems that you inherit. And sometimes they started out wrong. Well, they're still doing it wrong 20 years later because nobody's bothered to check them and correct what they do. In fact, some of the stuff, from what I understand, is illegal. But they don't realize it, and they're just doing it because, well, we've done it for the last 10
That's
years.
the way we've always done it, right? Yeah.
And,
Look out the rearview mirror and
so
keep going.
I think they have to look at that. I think we have to just look at the management system, and I'm hoping that the governor gets in with some of his people and that they feel secure enough to make some, I wouldn't say drastic, but momentous changes in how the government's run, because I think we have our own swamp here. It's not as bad as the federal swamp, but we do have to change some of the ways we do things.
Yeah.
I mean, you've run into that, Bill, with an interaction?
Not a whole lot. I think the governor's done a pretty good job. Governor Sununu, who's also running for office,
Right.
done a pretty good job taking steps to deal with the root cause of some of our bureaucracy, slowness, and inefficiency. I think Charlie Arlinghouse was a terrific pick for administrative services. Frank Edelblut, as we mentioned, for education. Brings up the issue of school choice that a lot of us feel strongly about.
Yeah.
Some of us feel the parents should decide what's best for the kids and not have where they happen to be living in Nashua decide where their kids go to school. They should have a broader choice than that.
Well, I think, too, the fact that we have so many charter schools and other types of private schools that exist to add to the variety of what's available for the children.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is amazing. I'm very much for that, and I hope that we can continue with that, and people are able to understand the options that are open for their children. It's something I never had.
No, I went to public schools for 12 years, and my teachers were pretty tough, and
they were. There's a lot different, that's for sure.
But my brother's more of a hands-on guy. I'm more of a paperwork guy, and he might have done a little different track if he had the choice.
Well, my children are all different. I'm glad I have 4 children that they all went different ways, and they're all successful. So I can't complain about that. But anyway, you have anything to say about the education system? Either one?
I would say ditto to everything Bill has said. I think choice is extremely important. I think that's part of the New Hampshire fabric too.
That's right.
That we are people who like to make decisions for ourselves. Personal liberties and I see school choice as a very positive thing, and I think that the teachers in the public school system, who are the good teachers, I think that they would value that competition. They really would.
I think so.
I really think it's going to drive up the standards for everybody.
And the success for the different kids.
Exactly.
And it's nothing nicer than seeing some youngster change and really develop as a person.
Yes.
And you need to have the right environment for that.
Right.
I would totally agree. I mean, I think conservative principle is choice and the freedom to have a variety of choices. I mean, if you look at every other aspect of life, I mean, can you imagine if we just had one kind of restaurant and it was run by the government? I mean, you look at just about any other sphere of life, and there are so many choices, and there's competition, and there's new ideas, except in this one particular area.
Yeah.
And if you take a look at what's happening with online media, and MIT has this open courseware project, so everything is being made available.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point about some bureaucracies and the government kind of being set in their ways. If you take a look at the education establishment, I think they're in need of some shaking up.
Well, you're speaking about choice. Let me to another touchy subject in the last minutes that we have here. What about health care? How do we go about giving everybody choices in health care?
Well, my comment on healthcare is I can't offer you a solution. One of my primary concerns, though, with whatever healthcare plans we engage in, is that we have to take care of people with pre-existing conditions. I know that there's the poison is always in the detail, as the saying goes. But with whatever we choose to do at a national level,
have some national regulation that has to take care of pre-existing conditions, but come out with private plans?
Yes, that,
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that would be a very one way to go about it.
But there again, I think you need choice. I think you need a variety, and
Yes.
and the problem is if you have I know on the other side they're talking about single payer healthcare. And again, if you just have one provider, whether it's
no choice.
education or food, or can you imagine if we all had government cars?
Yeah.
I mean, think about all the. No, but I mean, think about all the competition, and what does that produce? That produces a much better car.
Exactly.
If you think about, like this is the anniversary of the cell phone being created. Remember those huge bricks?
I saw that on TV this
It's amazing.
Yes, yes.
And if we had government cell phones, we'd probably still be carrying huge bricks around. So
I got 2 tin cans and a string.
look, what makes America great is this free enterprise system and the ability to have freedom and
variety,
choice and try different things.
Right.
And I think that is the underlying principle about what makes America great.
Talking about cars, boy, you think a car nowadays, just 10 years ago, didn't have half of the safety features on it.
Right. And if you just compare with other government-run healthcare systems like the UK, the National Health System, or Canada, my understanding is a lot of people in Canada come down here if they need anything done right away. So I think we've got a lot of comparisons that we don't want to follow.
Right.
Well, we've developed quite a few things for this conversation. We're going to have to make sure that we get this open conversation. And if any of our audience wants to talk about some of this, please let us know. You can call me at 598-2795 anytime, and we'll be happy to bring you on board. And especially if you're a Republican who is running for office. But that the station, the program is supported by the Nashua City Republican Committee, and we meet every second Thursday of the month. Right now it's at the Doubletree, but please come to our meetings, and we'd be happy to talk to you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.